I'm so humbled and honored to be here. I'm going to talk a little bit about design thinking, the topic that we all really love. But before I do that, I want to just kind of show you a little bit about what I do, because I'm not going to talk about my work, but this is just to give you a sense about the work that we do. Okay, that was a very quick overview. So, I'm a graphic designer, and it's very hard to explain to people what a graphic designer does, because people now will assume that we are, either branding people, or we do UX UI, or we deal with advertising. And I would say that, we deal with all of these in a kind of really, really broad way. But I always try to think about, my role as a graphic designer through the lens of playing with words, symbols, and images. And it's really about making information tangible and understandable. And if we can make things delightful, that's really the goal. So I teach as well. I teach at School of Visual Arts in New York City. I've been teaching there for 4 years now, so this is my senior class. I took this Instagram story last week when I got back to my class from a trip, and people asked me immediately on Instagram, do people have to be Asian in order to be in your class? No, okay, it's just this year we have a lot of Asian students from Korea, and you might notice that there's only one guy in my class, which is really weird. But anyhow, as a designer myself, and also as a design educator, I'm always very interested about different ways to do design, different ways to think about design. So I get really excited when I'm working with people from other disciplines. For example, we learn tremendously from architects, and I think a lot of the ways that architects use to think through their projects are really, really useful in graphic design as well. But there's one thing that I just can't really wrap my head around, and that is design thinking. And I asked myself, why? Why can't I really understand this? I'm not stupid. I'm very curious. I'm a hard learner. So I started to dig into it, and the more I got into it, the more outrageous it appears to me. So earlier last year, I gave a talk titled "Design Thinking is Bullshit." So this talk got a lot of, I think, attention, on the internet, and I also got a lot of feedback from people, both good and those who really question my intent behind this, and whether I really understood design thinking. And some of those critics call me that, I'm a graphic designer, I only do logos, I don't know how to solve more complex and bigger problems. So, in the last couple of months, I did a little soul searching, and I kind of today I want to reframe, my point of view on design thinking, and I try to kind of use a methodology that design thinking tends to use is to ask the right questions, right? So design thinking always starts out with how might we as the kind of starting point for design. So so I kind of reframed my talk around the around these 6 questions. So. Question number 1, and this is a question not only to design thinkers or design thinking enthusiasts, is for everybody and for myself, for designers as well. So that is how might we make design thinking a little bit more nuanced. So this is a chart that shows the internet. Search trend, on Google. As you can see that design thinking, like the search on design thinking started to rise around 2011. And around the year 2015, it really started to spike up. And that was the time when the renowned design firm IDEO put out this online course that's called IDEO U. I think there's a kind of correlation between that, and that is sort of the time when you see that the marketing around design thinking really started to to bubble up. And then, but as you search, just type in a term, design thinking. This is the kind of image that you will get. So it's basically just a series of same diagrams following these 5 steps. And I agree with some of the steps here. I'm not sure about the simplicity of this, and I'm not sure about that such a simple step-by-step solution can be a kind of universalized methodology to solve all the design problems. I think that is a very, very simplistic view. And then I try to, understand that, okay, are there any projects out there that we can look at and we can try to, analyze and understand, what design thinking really has produced in the world. So, when you type in design thinking projects or even design thinking case studies, what you would see, again, is the series of the same diagrams. And that is very, very strange to me, because when you type in things like architecture, you actually see buildings. And when you do the same search over different time, you get very different image results. And for me, as a graphic designer, an image is worth a lot more than words, So images actually show evidence. And what's really weird about design thinking is that it doesn't matter what search words that you type in, you always get more or less the same results. And then, of course, we're all very familiar with this image of people standing around a board, using Post-its as the medium, as the only medium for design. And you get more of this kind of view, and there's even more. So once you kind of see a lot of these, I get very worried about this particular methodology. Not that I hate Post-its. We actually use it quite a lot. But when you only use one single medium, and it's this little square, paper-based square, as the only kind of outlet for your research, for your thinking, for how you actually deal with design, I think that's a really big problem, because design needs to actually really go out of these little squares. Design needs to actually use a lot of research, looking at photos, images, precedents, looking at histories, other case studies, in order to kind of build a more holistic understanding about any problem. So I have a big problem with this methodology. And then more so, when you actually look into what is actually written on the Post-its, you realize that these are just people's thoughts. They're just thoughts in their head. So in a way, this is a kind of self-fulfilling loop, right? That is not open up to any other kind of thinking other than your own. I think that is a highly, highly problematic way to think about design. It's just way too simplistic. And then let's look at the origin of design thinking. I'm not going to go through the details of each, but design thinking really started out with a kind of academic, environment. Robert McKim, who is the second one in the diagram, he did this book that's called experience in visual thinking, that is a really, really fantastic book, and I recommend you to get it. He talked about how visual, or the ability to visualize things, or having the skill in visual thinking is really important to all design. But then, over the years, it kind of just evolved into very different things. And in the 90s, David Kelly, who's also a co-founder of IDEO, he kind of really brought it into the business setting as well as into Stanford. So that's when things began to actually, I think, go wrong. So if you kind of research design thinking, and this is a kind of, language that you will get a lot, you see that there's this kind of very simplistic equation between design thinking and creativity and innovation, as if design thinking is this thing that can promise innovation. And I find that a very problematic point of view because, first of all, innovation is not a thing. It's an attribute. It's a quality that you can hope that whatever you do can actually achieve the quality of innovation, but that's not a thing in itself. And there's this whole history on innovation as well as the talk of innovation. That's a very interesting topic, but that's a totally different talk, and there are better, scholars on that topic. So let's continue with this. So, innovation, one question that I would like to ask is that people have been innovating for centuries. So what did people actually do before design thinking came about? Right? Think about that. Right? So, okay, anyhow. If you look at, what design thinking advocates, is that, it's a kind of, it's a solution-based design methodology that helps people to think like designers, to create better things, to work better, to help you with an organizational problem, to make more profits, so on and so forth. It's all a kind of very, positive attitude on design thinking itself. And I think what it fails to do is to actually look at the opposite side of things, which is what a designer does on a day-to-day basis, is that whatever we do, it doesn't matter today it's a product that we design, or it's a packaging, or it's something that we put out into the world. There's always some consequence to it. I find design thinking is kind of very ignorant to the consequences that it may produce into the world, such as waste or climate change, so on and so forth. And I would love to see more design thinkers produce work in that area. Okay, question number 2, how might we give it a more meaningful vocabulary? So this is about the language around design thinking. So as you know, each discipline has its own very particular set of vocabulary, and you really need to have a very deep set of vocabulary in order to actually have a deep dialogue about things. For example, in graphic design, there's a whole set of vocabulary about abstraction, about meaning, about typography, so on and so forth. But then, if you get into design thinking, you will get this kind of thing: unleash, unlock. It's kind of terrifying to actually see that design is being presented as this kind of beast that you can just let go and attack the world and then win everything. I think there's a kind of attitudinal problem here. It doesn't kind of think about design as a thing that you develop. Right? Development takes time. Or you building things also takes time, but rather it's this instant satisfaction that you can unleash or unlock something instantaneously. And then, once you dive deeper into it, my God, it's packed with jargons. Which, again, I think illustrates a problem, about the design thinking discipline itself. These are some of the words that I was very intrigued by. For example, body storming. I literally had to Google it. It's basically brainstorming through role playing, right? So why can't we just call it like that? Why do we have to call it body storming? Extreme user, my God, that really sounds like a drug addict to me. Ideation is basically concepting. and think, probably, right? Radical innovation, the feedback loop, so on and so forth. It's really crazy, but then if you talk to a designer, doesn't matter which discipline the designer is from, be architects, fashion designers, we actually use very boring words. And we are concerned about very, very boring things, such as budget, audience, the context, the site, if you're an architect, the semantics of things, if you're a graphic designer. So, so now you kind of begin to get a sense why design thinking's language is really problematic. Next question, how might we elevate its standard? Well, honestly, I haven't found too many case studies on design thinking to actually convince me that, it has really made a great impact on the world itself. But rather, I find the case studies out there tend to just settle for the bottom line. So, for example, this is a MRI machine. I don't know how many of you have gone through this, but this is a very terrifying environment for children. I think for adults too, you have to go through this scanner. So GE allegedly, tried to solve this problem through design thinking. So what it came up with was to put, cartoons and Tony the Tiger on the wall. And then they made a very big case study out of it. I'm okay with the idea of, making the environments more childlike with the visual language that they're familiar with. But I think that the bar here is just basically too low. If you look at the environment, it is terrible. If you look at the ceiling, it is too low. The lighting is terrible. We need an architect here, right? But I think that design thinking or design thinking case studies tend to just settle for the bottom line. Next question. How might we change this attitude on education? All right, so I think, for those of you who are familiar with design thinking or who follow design thinking, you know that it has been trying to get into education system, different levels of education systems in different way, from high school down to now kindergarten, with the notion that kids really need to learn the method of design thinking in order to solve the world's, very big problems. But then, if you look at design thinking's attitude on the design thinking education itself, this is what you would get nowadays. You would get boot camps, very fast courses that you pay $2.99, $5.99, $199. I don't know why they all end up with 99. That you can actually learn how to design. I find that an extremely dangerous idea, not only to the world of design, but to the idea of education on itself. It really kind of promotes this fast food thinking that you can just pay something and then get it really fast, you pump it into your stomach and you're gonna get good at it. I find it really, really troublesome. It's sort of like wanting to become an Olympic athlete without wanting to be trained, So that's sort of my problem with it. And this is a course that Stanford's D School now offers. I mean, look at this. This is insane. This picture is insane to me, right? Just the combination of the words and the image, behind it, and what's actually in the image. Would you really trust this course? I would not. Thank you. How might we make it more beautiful? Okay, I'm a graphic designer. I'm very critical of anything that has a look to it, right? Specifically when it comes to information design, when just a bundle of things need to have hierarchy, clarity, needs to have, style, needs to be pleasant, needs to be legible and all that. When you kind of just survey the graphic visual world of design thinking, you get this kind of stuff. To me, this is really, really horribly ugly. And that is bad. And how come nobody's actually, doing anything about it? I would love to teach graphic design or basic typography to anyone who's doing design thinking right now. We're trying to generate something about design thinking. But then you would get a certain kind of oppositional view about that, well, just don't worry about the look of things, because design thinking is really not about design. So this is a statement by Mr. Brett Waters. I don't know him, but he teaches a design thinking class at Stanford. So on his website, he made this statement that goes, design thinking is an engineering methodology for developing successful products. Design thinking has nothing to do with making something pretty and everything to do with making something useful. For example, an engineer would use it to develop an ugly machine that does its job beautifully. I find this a really simplistic dichotomy between form and function, and I think, frankly, it is quite irresponsible to think that design thinking or anything that you design has nothing to do with how it may manifest itself in the real world. Everything has its form. Look at this. These are the gadgets that permeate our lives on a day-to-day basis. How can one say that these machines or, whatever thing that engineers make don't have real impact in the world and don't have to actually be beautiful? To me, I think beauty is actually intelligence. Beauty is precision. Beauty is not decoration. So I find the idea on beauty through the lens of design thinking really, really problematic. And then furthermore, I think what it profoundly ignores the importance of artistry, of craftsmanship, of beauty, of art, of culture, and all these things that actually elevate the quality of our life and the quality of our culture. That kind of statement completely removed the importance of these things that actually really, really matter. And I'm going to play a short video about of Steve Jobs that there was this interview conducted with him in 1995, and I'm not a Steve Jobs fan. I'm very intrigued by his work. I'm very intrigued by what he has built and the things that we're using right now. But there's this little snippet in his interview in which he critiqued Microsoft. But he talked about other things that I think resonated with me really well, specifically on the issue of beauty.
The only problem with Microsoft is they just have no taste. They have absolutely no taste. And what that means is, I don't mean that in a small way, I mean that in a big way. In the sense that they don't think of original ideas, and they don't bring much culture into their product. And you say, well, why is that important? Well, proportionally spaced fonts come from typesetting and beautiful books. That's where one gets the idea. If it weren't for the Mac, they would never have that in their products. And so I guess I am saddened, not by Microsoft's success. I have no problem with their success. They've earned their success, for the most part. I have a problem with the fact that they just make really third-rate products. Their products have no spirit to them. Their products have no sort of spirit of enlightenment about them. They are very pedestrian. And the sad part is that most customers don't have a lot of that spirit either. But the way that we're going to ratchet up our species is to take the best and to spread it around to everybody so that everybody grows up with better things and starts to understand the subtlety of these better things.
Okay, so that interview pretty much summed up everything that I was talking about. And you feel free to take out Microsoft and replace it with design thinking, and that kind of summarizes everything. Okay, last thing. It's a very important question, I think. How can we actually make it just a little more delightful? It is terribly dry, I have to say. We read a lot of things from design thinking about design thinking. You know, besides all the jargons, it's incredibly boring and dry. So we made a project. You know, Ravi asked us to do something, and I think this is a great, great subject matter to do something with. So what we did was that we created this piece through the lens of a graphic designer, you know, that we play with words and images and symbols and diagrams. So the thing is called, Can Design Thinking Help Us Understand Design Thinking? So what we did was that we basically took the entire design thinking 5-step methodology and try to analyze it and try to apply it onto design thinking itself. So we made a poster out of it. We generated all the content. It's really, really dense, you know, so you can't see much of the writing from here. But if this doesn't kind of give you a different idea about design thinking, it will definitely make you smile. So we're going to distribute this poster afterwards, and this is my talk. Thank you.